if you would search Matthew Stafford trade in Google, Peter, you would definitely get some results that take us back 2 years to when the Rams swapped Jared Goff, 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for Matthew Stafford. But you would also get some more recent items speculating on the possibility of the Rams retrading Matthew Stafford after only 2 seasons. Here's General Manager Les Snead from Thursday talking about the question of whether or not Stafford definitely will be the team's starting quarterback in 2023.
We're going to definitely rely on Matthew. He's definitely one of our pillars. So with that being said, I think as I said, step one of this thing is getting under the cap. Unfortunately, to get under the cap, that usually means, trying to figure out, it usually means deletion, right, with some of your better veteran players who are making higher salaries. And it can also mean maybe there's an unrestricted free agent or 2 or 3 or 4 that you can't necessarily re-sign to get under the cap. But there are some players that have been here, that have done that, that have shown they can change the math in a football game. Matthew Stafford being one of them. Unfortunately, last year, he went through a tough time with the injury. So, the recency bias of last year's inconsistent for him, other than the fact that there was injuries and there was a lot of injuries around him. But he's definitely someone we're going to rely on, and we're going to have to rely on as we do remodel this.
That's a new twist on rebuild, regroup, reload, remodel. I like that. And, the problem is, Peter, last year the injuries for Matthew Stafford predated the commencement of the season. Because of injuries from 2021, he couldn't throw. He couldn't participate in the offseason program. There were issues that hovered over the team in training camp, and then all of a sudden it just kind of went away. But you throw in a bad offensive line, not nearly as good as it was the prior year. Guy who's not fleet of foot gets banged up, and there are questions about the long-term durability, availability, and also willingness of the Rams to keep Matthew Stafford around. The problem is the way his contract is structured. I mean, they really can't do anything. He's got $57 million that becomes fully guaranteed next week. But if they try to trade him, they're looking at a $48 million cap acceleration for 2023. Now, they already have $12 million that counts under the $60 million signing bonus he got last year, but it's another $36 million that hits this year if they trade him before June 1. And I can't imagine them trading him after June 1. And based upon what Snead said yesterday, it looks like they're not going to trade him at all. But, they got so drunk on their success in 2021 and they started handing out all these big contracts. They've really got their hands tied, Peter, on multiple guys that even if they did want a fresh start at quarterback, even if they really are concerned that Stafford's never going to be consistently healthy and it's time to move on, they just can't. They just can't without doing serious damage to their salary cap.
And plus, Mike, I don't think right now that Sean McVay, when he looks at A, the quarterback market, and B, his own team, I just simply don't think he sees an alternative that can make his team remotely competitive other this year, 2023. And Sean McVay is not going to go through another 5-12 season. He's not doing that. And so I think he knows that there is a line in the sand right now. And it's going to be very, very difficult to cross the line, which is between an also-ran and a significant contender. But the only way they have a chance to get to significant contender status is if they have Matthew Stafford. There's no other quarterback that they can get, financially or otherwise. They can't say, hey, let's get rid of Matthew Stafford and go get Jimmy Garoppolo. Even that would be ridiculously, prohibitively expensive. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo probably, I would think, at its base, he's going to be a $30 million player in this market for someone. So there's no way the Rams could even get involved in that. I don't think they want Baker Mayfield except as an insurance policy, even though there was that moment, one of the coolest moments of any recent NFL season, the Thursday night game where after about 6 minutes of practice, he went out and beat the Raiders on Thursday Night Football with an incredible final drive. But they've whatever it is they're going to say, and I do think they legitimately still like Matthew Stafford. He's their guy this year, so it's almost fruitless to talk about it.
Well, I agree with you. There's nothing they can do at this point. And even if they could manage the cap hit, think about what they would have gotten out of Stafford and what they would have given up to get him. 2 1s and a 3. And Jared Goff, which at the time was, please save us from Jared Goff. The thinking in some circles is they gave up an extra first-round pick just to unload the awful contract they gave him. But, Peter, this is just the latest example of this string of bad contracts the Rams do. They really do some bad contracts. And I'm looking at Stafford's numbers for next year. Let's say that they give him 1 more year. Let's say it doesn't work again this year and they want to change next year. Next year, the pre-June 1 cap charge for trading him is $55.5 million. So it doesn't get any better in 2024 if they haven't gotten any better and they're ready to move on to someone else. So, and his cap number goes from $20 million this year to $49.5 next year based upon the way this contract is structured. So they've put themselves into a spot here, and a lot of it is, and look, they knew when they traded for Matthew Stafford they were going to have to give him another contract at some point, but they gave him one hell of a contract, and now the salary cap chickens have come home to roost for the LA Rams, and they're just in a weird spot right now. Snead also said, Peter, that they're not going to trade Cooper Kupp or Aaron Donald, but you've got other guys like Jalen Ramsey, who seems destined to be on the way out the door, Leonard Floyd,
Allen Robinson.
Yeah, it really is a team that's in a weird sort of flux, and I still can't recall. And yes, they have a brand new, relatively speaking, Super Bowl trophy to make up for it, but still, that price came due dramatically and steeper than I think any Super Bowl champion has ever had to pay it. This is the backside of F them picks, and this remodel. They may have to gut the house as part of this remodel that Snead referred to.
I think what you're going to see the Rams do, Mike, okay, so talking to people at the scouting combine, this is the very strong impression I got. And I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago and then found out a little bit more at the combine. So the Rams right now have the 36th pick in the draft. And I believe they will not use that 36th pick in the draft. I believe they will use that pick to basically turn it into 3 picks. Let's say, and I'm totally inventing this, 60, 95, and 180. Okay? But I think the reason why you're going to see that is the Rams believe. You remember Ernest Jones, the quarterback who made, or the linebacker rather, who made some big plays against quarterback Joe Burrow in the second half of the Super Bowl, and really, until Bobby Wagner got there a year ago, was a rising star inside linebacker in the NFL, and will continue that trajectory this year with the departure of Bobby Wagner. Well, he was a 5th-round draft pick, and I believe that the Rams think, along with guys, lower picks, 3rd-day picks like Nick Scott, the safety, they are going to go all in on day 3 picks and maybe even low day 2 picks. Because as of right now, Mike, if you look at where the Rams are, they've got 9 picks in the last 100 of this draft. And I believe they're going to have more. And next year, they're going to have even more draft choices. And I project over these 2 drafts, they'll have about 25 picks. Now, look, we all know they don't all make the team, but the Rams have changed and are in the process of changing their overall organizational philosophy, because most likely a year from now, Aaron Donald will be retired. Cooper Kupp will keep playing, but the great players will keep marching out the door. And what they're going to do is need that scouting department, need it desperately to hit on, let's say, 8 to 10 of these players over these next 2 drafts to come in and be immediate contributors. That's their only path to contender again, at least with Matthew Stafford as quarterback.
So pluck them picks would be the next T-shirt
that's
that
correct.
Les Snead is wearing.
Yeah.
Pluck. I said
I like
pluck.
that.
No need to bleep in the UK, unless it's some obscure curse word there that I'm not aware of. And there are some random terms that we use without any real thought that are indeed, as we have learned over the 4 years or so that we've been on Sky Sports, that they are frowned upon in certain establishments in the UK. So, Peter, there is wisdom in this. And I answered this question yesterday on a radio spot in Seattle as it relates to the Bears trading down, because I can see a scenario. We're going to talk about this coming up. I think the Bears could trade down 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the top 10 and just keep compiling picks. And the idea is the more lottery tickets, and this is your Jimmy Johnson point you make from time to time, the more draft picks you have, the more scratch-offs you have, the more likely you are to get some winners. And when you know that these bad contracts that you handed out in the euphoria that existed in the aftermath of winning the Super Bowl, you have to balance that out with low-cost rookie wage scale contracts. That's the other side of this, Peter. All those picks, day 2, day 3, they come at a low cap charge. You're filling out your roster with guys who are not eating up cap space, and they won't until they get a second contract, if they ever do. So you get through 3 or 4 years, starting this year and next year, with these low cap number players. That's how you deal with a $55 million cap charge if you have to move on from Matthew Stafford after this year, or a $49 million cap charge if you keep him after this year. That's how you balance it out. That's how you construct your roster and stay under the cap and have enough players where you can go out and actually be competitive.
And I think that's exactly what they will do. I think they'll most likely hang on to Stafford for the next 2 years unless he's just ravaged by injury this year. But I also think the one thing that you have to watch out for is, the Rams finally will have a first-round pick next year. And if you are the Rams right now and you have some way to have a high pick next year, there's going to be 2 excellent quarterbacks in the draft next year. You can do exactly what you did to get Jared Goff and to get all of these guys who, and we're going to talk about the Bears later. If you have to trade up, you're going to have to trade probably 2 future ones in addition to this year's one to get that player. But the Rams now will at least be in position, if they need to go get a quarterback, to trade future ones next year at this time. They're not going to do it this year, but they'd be in position next year at this time to be able to trade up. And that is what I think the Rams have to think of doing. Look, there's no way, if I am Kevin Demoff, if I'm Stan Kroenke, if I'm Les Snead, there's no way I'm letting Sean McVay, if he gets a bug up his rear end and says, we have to have John Doe, let's trade back into the first round and trade next year's one to go and get whoever is the player they fancy. No, 1,000 times no. Do not touch next year's draft, because that's a draft where the Rams really could need it to move up to get a quarterback.
Well, especially if there's any belief in the organization that McVay may bolt after 2023. And why wouldn't there be? He almost did after 2022. He was on the brink, the precipice. He was ready to go. And we've talked about that at length, what turned him around. But he's on a year-to-year arrangement right now. And if they suffer through another bad year, when you look at the item from The Athletic from a couple of weeks ago, where he was basically despondent in 2022, he may not want to tolerate that again. Yes, and he may say, I'm done, I'm out. So if he's got that mindset now where maybe I'll be gone next year, it's a lot easier to say, who cares about next year's first-round pick if it gets me somebody who makes me not despondent in 2023?
Mike, after reading Jordan Rodriguez's story in The Athletic, which was tremendous, after reading that story, I thought of two things. Number one, so Sean McVay basically has gone to this team twice now and said, I really need something. Okay, the first time was, I really need another quarterback. I've lost trust in Jared Goff. So they went out and they got Matthew Stafford at a very big price. However, for all those who say, oh my God, what a mistake that was, listen, they got a Lombardi out of it. So no matter what happens, and even if they hit rock bottom in the next 2 or 3 years, which they might, even if they absolutely hit rock bottom, to me, a Super Bowl is worth it. And a lot of people might say, no, I don't think it is. I do. And I think most people in the NFL do. So that's the one time. And then this year, kind of a quieter way, he was very unhappy with his coaching staff. And there was a point in Jordan Rodriguez's story where she said that basically he hired his new running backs coach this year after a 15-minute telephone conversation. So by the end of this year, I think McVay had started to think to himself, maybe I make mistakes when I act impetuously, and he got rid of a lot of coaches this year, or by mutual agreement. I had heard during the season that the Liam Cohen experiment as offensive coordinator was miserable, and that was part of the problem. And then Liam Cohen, wanted to have a little bit of a life as well as to be a football coach, so he went back to Kentucky. But he wasn't the only one. However many changes they made on the coaching staff, 6 or 8 coaches. So now McVay, has done it with his quarterback, and he's done it with his coaching staff. And I think Sean McVay, has to realize right now, look, he's happy to be back. I legitimately think he's happy to be back. They are very happy to have him. There's nobody inside that organization who thinks rolling eyes, oh my God, what is McVay going to want next and all that. But he understands that he can't act as impetuously as he has at times in the past. So I think all of that means this is a really important year for his, not necessarily for his coaching future, like that he's never going to coach again. I firmly believe he will not be John Madden, who walked away at 40 whatever and never came back. Even like Bill Cowher, who walked away at whatever it was, 49 or 50, and never came back, and we kept waiting for him to come back. I think he will coach, even if he stops coaching after this year, he'll return to coaching at some point. He's just too young. It's amazing. He's still the youngest head coach in the NFL. So to me, this is an important season for McVay, but also because he realizes that, hey, impetuousness is great. It wins you a Super Bowl, all that stuff. But there's also a downside to it.
Yeah, it's like the mess at your house the morning after you have a huge party. It's got to be cleaned up. And sometimes it takes more than just a mop and a bucket to clean it up. And sometimes it takes a long time to get it back to where it was before. And think about if they hadn't won that Super Bowl. Think about the accountability that may have been meted out from the top of the organization, because they went all in and it worked, but there still was a huge invoice on the back end that they are still suffering through.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.